Hey, it's Sam, and I'm inviting you to an upcoming class that you're going to really love. It's called Astrology Stories and Celebrations, and it's where I'm going to unravel for you and explain for you all of the important Indian holidays and celebrations and their connections to astrology. You probably don't know this, but all of the Indian celebrations have a relationship with astrology. Those of you who try to keep up with Vedic astrology, there's always some celebration. We're always celebrating something, right? As I record this in early October of 2021, the previous fortnight was called Pitru Paksha, where we honor the ancestors. And then the next new moon starts, and it's what's called Navratri, which is the Divine Mother Festival. Then the next new moon is called Diwali, right? Where we have the Festival of Lights. That's related to Lord Rama. Again, Navratri, the 9 nights of the Divine Mother, is related to the Divine Mother Goddess. The Pitru Paksha is related to, the sign of Leo. We have the sign of Virgo. We have the sign of Libra, where the Sun and Moon are debilitated, and Saturn is involved there in this story called the Ramayana. And there's a correlation to all of these Indian epic stories in the astrology. In fact, not just a correlation, but the stories themselves are actually ways to personify and, you might say, anthropomorphize, which means to make anthropomorphic or like people. Long way to say that it takes the planetary forces, which are not people, and turns them into like people. So, for example, Lord Shiva is like a symbol of the sun and also Saturn, right? Jupiter is like a symbol of, Jupiter is like represented as like gurus and teachers, right? Venus is represented by goddess Lakshmi. Ganesha is also a representative of Jupiter. We're going to talk about all of these correlations through many myths and stories. And again, not just in the abstract, but also in the very literal. And again, as I'm doing this class here in October, it'll be actually the weekend of October 23rd and 24th. But that's right in between the Navratri, which is the Divine Mother celebration, and Diwali, which is this story of Lord Rama and this sort of epic drama that unfolds where you have, Lord Hanuman and Ravana and Rama and Sita and Lakshman, and you even have a story back into what's called the Srimad Bhagavatam of sage Narada, which started the whole kind of karmic cycle. And you'll get not only extremely deep insight into these stories and their karmic lessons, but also how astrology relates to all of it. Now, again, this will not only deepen your appreciation of your life on Earth and these Indian tales, but also teach you some amazing things about astrology that you really wouldn't understand unless you understood these stories. And by the way, people should understand, even most Indians, even though they practice and they celebrate all of these rituals, they don't understand the astrology and the cosmology behind it. Now, again, I want you to know this is really what we're going to delve into first. The first part of the weekend course is going to be me talking about the Zodiac connections to the calendar, the Zodiac, again, because these festivals are all celebrated at the same times each year generally, but certain astrological and astronomical configurations have to happen, but they all happen around the same times of the year, because that's when the Earth is in a certain part of its orbit around the sun. So we're going to look at the connections between the seasons and the cycles of nature that we're living here on Earth, which is again measured by a calendar, and the Zodiac, which is how we measure astrology. Now, the Zodiac and the calendar are two different things. They're very distinct, of course. One doesn't have anything to do with the other one. The Earth going around the sun has nothing to do with Jupiter in the sky, right? That's a completely separate thing. Again, this also brings up, issues that we see right now in the world with the Zodiac and the calendar and whatnot. I've done a lot of research into this, so you're going to get my latest research, which is connected to a book I'm finishing now on the Indian zodiacs, but that latest research will be in there so that you understand this sacred astronomy and understand that astrology is literally sacred astronomy. So you'll understand the context of why we have two, for example, Navratris. We have one in the spring, we have one in the fall. Navratri is the Divine Mother worship. So we'll look at the astronomical and astrological and seasonal considerations. You'll learn how the calendar works in India. It's very interesting. The 6 seasons and the Soli lunar calendar, as well as the zodiac. They're all different. But you'll also learn the planets as these living forces that are embodied through the stories and the myths of India. For example, Shiva and his wife Parvati. This is the sun and the moon. So when you see all of their stories, you're looking at the interplay between the sun and the moon. Ganesha is the son of Shiva and Parvati, and he's symbolized by Jupiter. And another son is Kartikeya. He's symbolized by Mars. So again, this whole family of Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Mars are symbolized by that Shiva family. That's just on the surface. But also the celebrations that bring Lord Shiva to life, like Mahashivaratri, and other ways that Shiva is, Shiva and Ganesha and the goddess are brought about, will be explored, and their planetary correlations. You'll also see the zodiac signs and how they provide this kind of environment for different change and transformation. For example, we have a celebration called Guru Purnima, right, which is the full moon. Purnima means full moon of the Guru, right? And again, this usually happens around the time when the moon is full in the sign of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. Sagittarius is the zodiac sign. Shivaratri happens on the fortnight, or on the what's called Chaturdashi, when the sun and moon come together almost in Saturn's signs, right? Which is related to Shiva. So again, you'll see the correlations. Again, whether people know this or not, which even many Indians don't, you'll know it. And that'll not only deepen your appreciation for these myths and the symbology and what the myths actually are meant to teach you, but it'll also deepen your astrology in ways that you'll never be able to understand if you don't learn this. I'm also going to be joined by my student and great astrologer in her own right and great researcher in her own right, Dr. Malini Iyer. She's one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on Indian stories, mythology, telling the stories as someone who grew up in India. She explains this from a very unique perspective. You have a great opportunity to learn from someone who not only understands these things from the Indian perspective, and not just someone who grew up kind of mindlessly celebrating these holidays, but she's also someone who has done enormous research into the meaning of them. And she's a great astrologer, so she brings kind of the same mindset that I have about the astrology, but then a very deep and intimate knowledge and personal relationship with these stories from the culture itself. Like, she can talk about what it's like to celebrate Shivaratri in India, or the Divine Mother, or Diwali, and bring an in-depth, analysis of all of these stories that I simply can't do. So she's uniquely qualified to bring these stories to life in very unique ways. And by the way, I've also researched these things a lot, so I also understand these stories very well, but frankly, I don't talk about them as much as I maybe should have, or maybe should, because they're so rich and so complex and so nuanced that I don't want to misspeak, because sometimes things I don't know them as well as a native Indian would, but I understand all of the important sort of touchstones, and I mainly understand them through the lens of the astrology. That's my main relationship with them, is deciphering the astrological symbols in the stories. So that's what I've really been focused on. But her and I together, this is going to be really transformative. And so again, one of the things is that you will also see the connection to the Vedic deities that are from the Vedas, like Indra and Agni and Soma and Rudra, and how they became the deities like Shiva and Ganesha and Vishnu and whatnot. There's a whole kind of way, or, for example, Vayu, who was the god in the Vedas, his son was called Hanuman. So Hanuman is a more approachable god from a different group of texts called the Puranas. So again, we're going to talk about how these things are all brought together and how different texts also weave these stories together. There's a lot of rich symbolism in these stories, but underneath it all, they're all what are called leelas. They're all meant to illustrate the multifaceted life on earth that we're all living. We're very attached to all this, right? And those stories, when you read them, like the Ramayana, losing the kingdom and the wife being tortured and God knows what else. Bhagavad Gita, they're on the battlefield, everybody's dying in blood, and it's all just so dramatic. But it also is meant to illustrate the leelas of life. So you'll get a perspective, especially in this world we live in now. We're so attached, we're so in the leela. This is a great way to understand that, the world has always been this way. We think, oh my God, now it's so different. There are things that are different, but it's all still the same to some extent. And so we're going to explore some of the origins even of these myths themselves. Some of them, it's very surprising. Like even the Ramayana with all of its sort of drama actually leads back to something. The sage Narada, who was the sage who was takes form as Lord Vishnu, started something, lifetimes ago that took all of these different lifetimes to then show up as the Ramayana. So we're going to explore all of these different karmic threads and explain how these stories are really meant to land those concepts of Sanatana Dharma, like everything else. All the Vedic knowledge has that as a through line. So you'll learn a lot about karma and how to understand your karma as well, just by hearing these stories and getting that unique perspective. Again, we'll also talk about like the nakshatras and all of the spiritual aspects of astrology that you've heard me talk about and that you know about, but again, brought into these beautiful stories. Not just the stories, literally the stories, but all of the different celebrations. And we'll look literally at the reason that we celebrate, Ganesh Chaturthi on this lunar day and this particular Chaturthi. Not another Chaturthi, but this one. Why do we celebrate Shivaratri, Mahashivaratri, on this Krishna Chaturdashi? Why this one and not another one? Why do we celebrate Akshaya Tritiya on this particular Tritiya, which is a lunar phase? Again, we're going to talk about the tithis, and you're going to learn Indian timekeeping as well. And you'll see, okay, this is why this one symbolizes this, and it's done at this particular time. So like everything, when we don't examine what we're doing, everything can seem kind of random. And the beauty of all these Vedic teachings is that you see that none of it was really random. And you see that whether people know it or not, especially in this modern world, the astrology is built into everything. This is what makes Vedic astrology just so mind-blowing, is that, again, whether the priests knew it or not, or whether these people knew it, these celebrations all have an astrological correlation. And so after this weekend class, you'll also see that. So I'm really looking forward to teaching this with Malini. She's a joy. Many of you have probably seen her and I teach together. We have a good time doing that. It's always a very lively way to teach. Instead of just me talking like you're seeing me now, it's me and then there's someone else, and we talk back and forth, and we really kind of massage the information, and we really kind of go deep, ask each other questions, get feedback, and seeing the teachings brought out in this lively conversation is really good, but particularly in this context because, again, I bring a really strong expertise in the astrological, correlations, and, Malini also understands that very well, but she brings a depth to the Indian stories and the mythology and the symbology behind it and the nuance that is remarkable. She really understands this stuff very, very well. Better than anyone I know, that I know personally. Really knows how to bring out the essence of, different facets of the Ramayana, for example, and what the motivations really were with Sita, and with Hanuman and with Ravana, and how those insights are directly connected to the planets, and not just the planets in general, but the planets at that time of year when the celebration happens. Again, it's incredibly specific. This energy, this energetic potential that we're meant to embody at the time that these celebrations take place, are a way to, again, anthropomorphize these moments. So, but what is it? Well, that's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn why Navratri happens now, and why it's not just some festival, it's this one. It's this particular one. And why after that Diwali happens, and what that story is, and even how those two stories commingle, and why before that it was Pitru Paksha, and why you also had, Ganesh Chaturthi right before that, and et cetera, et cetera. So you see how the year, which is like a calendar, is connected to Zodiac, which is the cosmic karma unfolding. And you'll hear it from Eastern and Western perspective, myself and Malini, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this. So we'll do the weekend, November 23rd and 24th, and then we'll have a follow-up Q&A the following weekend. So it'll wind up being more than 10 hours, 10 to 12 hours. If you've come to my classes before like this, you know how it works. We just go right through it on the weekend, and we teach with no interruptions, no distracting questions. Then we come back the next weekend when people have had time to digest, and then we can have a conversation, ask some questions, talk a little bit more after we've had a week to kind of digest the material. We'll do it that way this time as well. And it's a great way to do it, especially this time of year where we have Navratri, we have Diwali, and it's really a great time now. Even the way the planets are configured in the sky right now, with the Mercury, retrograde exalted Mercury will be that weekend. The moon will be exalted that weekend as well. So it'll be a great time to really come together, gather around the kind of virtual campfire or whatever we would call it, and tell some stories and really connect with that transcendent spiritual nature. So go ahead and register for it, and we'll see you soon.